I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to address the Board of Finance. I recognize the effort that they and the Board of Education have put into this budget. My comments tonight are not meant as any disrespect to you or the Board of Education. That said, one of the Board of Finance's first objectives is to propose a budget that voters trust, support, and pass on the first ballot. Since 2010, the board has repeatedly failed in this objective. What lessons can the Board of Finance derive from these failures? First, the defeated education budgets did not result in any deterioration or curbing of education for Clinton students, nor did they result in any educator losing their job or not being hired. It resulted instead of large budget surpluses. Secondly, voters will not tolerate big budget increases that generate big surpluses while enrollments drop and cost per pupil needlessly soar. The state's minimum budget requirement ratchets up based upon the previous year's allocated operating budget and is inflated when the previous budget generates a large surplus. Many parents will speak emotionally in support of almost any budget proposed by the administration, regardless of the underlying facts. And some Board of Finance members exhibit an indelible fidelity to these highly charged sentiments by blindly rubber stamping any budget proposed by the school administration. The problem with learning from experience is the test comes first and the lesson comes later. The problem with not learning from experience is making the same mistake over and over again. Albert Einstein allegedly observed that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So what can and should you do differently this time to get a more preferable result? Lynn Freed has suggested the time has come for a top-down budget instead of a bottom-up budget. In this case, you tell the Board of Education what you're willing to allocate to education, and they have to figure out how they will live within it. But how can you do that reasonably? The administration has finally recognized that birth rates in Clinton dropped precipitously in 2010. This is a chart. The blue line shows last year's enrollment projection. Finally, they recognize that the birth rates had dropped 27% in 2010. They've not recovered. The green line is the current enrollment. So they've taken this, you'd expect, having adopted this new birth rate, recognizing it, that they would actually have lowered the projected enrollment in subsequent years. The blue line again represents what the enrollment was projected in last year's budget. The green line is what's projected this year. So instead of lowering future projections, they actually increase those future projections. So what has happened over the years is that as enrollments have dropped, the costs have continued to go up year after year after year. And as a result of that, this dotted line are the costs, the blue line is the enrollment, which is going to continue to go down at an even steeper rate. What occurs then is that the cost per pupil keeps going up at a very rapid rate, and I think needlessly. So, what is a reasonable budget? It's a good question, I think, and I'll try to give you a reasonable answer. The blue line on this chart represents the budgets that have been proposed in previous years. The red line represents what we ultimately passed. The green line represents, these are operating costs and operating budgets. The green line represents the actual costs. The difference between the green line and the red line is the budget surplus. The difference between the green line and the blue line is what the budget surplus would have been had we passed those budgets on the first round. The currently projected surplus for the Board of Education's operating budget is estimated to be $480,000. And I think it's more likely to be $300,000 higher because the non-certified pensions contribution of $320,000 has already been fully funded on the year-to-date basis. But using the lower number projects an operating expense for the current year of $30,063,651 for the fiscal year. An increase in the actual spending of 2%, which would take this green line up to here, not up to here. That would result in $30,664,924. Add $100,000 to that for margin, to give you a margin above what you're actually going to need. And now you have a $30,764,924 budget, a 1% increase in the operating budget, but a 2% increase in actual real spending. Using last year's budget as a way of deciding what this year's budget is without looking at what actual spending leads to these budget surpluses that really help no one. I also have a paragraph in here about the capital spending, which I'm not going to go into for the audience, but clearly there is an opportunity to decrease that by $61,000 lower than the budget that the Board of Selectmen passed. In the end, this increase in education total spending would be $911,856 over the actual spending, a 2% or 2%, and the budget by $431,000 or 1.4%. With the unaffordable mushrooming of cost of education debt over the next 2 years, now would be a very good time to show the taxpayers good faith with a budget that is the right size. Thank you for your attention.